tonight we are interviewing Jack Binder, the founder of FilmBudget.com, who is also an Oscar-nominated producer with a whole bunch of incredible credits and has worked with leading actors and directors in the entertainment industry. And the reason I wanted to do this particular event tonight is specifically because there's a huge focus in the entertainment industry about the fact that a producer needs a script. And what there's not a lot of focus on is the fact that a producer actually needs a good budget. And the reason he needs a good budget is because he's going to have to raise money to produce that particular project. He's going to have to hire people to appear in the project. He's going to have to get cast and crew aboard, and he's going to have to get people to locations. And if he guesses wrong about the amount of money that he needs, he's not going to be able to complete production. And there is absolutely nothing more expensive. There's nothing more of a deadweight loss than a film that doesn't finish production. So if you do not have a budget, you do not have a way to know whether or not you don't know the true numbers that are required for you to be able to produce your project, it's almost always guaranteed to fail. So the interesting thing is that the budget has to be created early on in the project because that's how you know how much money you're going to raise. And then it has to be maintained over the course of the project because you may not be able to hire somebody at a particular rate. You may not be able to shoot the place you thought you were going to shoot at. You may not be able to get the incentives that you thought you were going to be able to get. So one of the things I found really interesting about Jack's work is the fact that he's one of the very, very few highly credited producers who's willing to create budgets for projects and to help new producers figure out early on what the numbers are that they need for their projects. And in addition to that, he serves as a consulting producer so that as they are moving through the process of making adjustments to their budgets, figuring out how they're going to handle distribution, approaching named talent, attaching key crew, as they're moving through these processes, they have someone that can actually help them answer these questions on a fee-for-hire basis, which is normally not possible. I usually tell people, or have told people in the past, that they should plan to spend $4,000 to $6,000 to get a production budget. And I have told them that they should hire a line producer and one with credits that are the kind of thing that maybe an investor will actually believe, because the line producer, if you're a new producer, people don't know if they can trust you. You don't have credits to prove that you can actually make a good film. You don't have credits to prove that you can actually attach talent, and nobody knows for sure that you're going to be able to deliver on any of your promises. So one of the solutions for that is a new producer usually hires a line producer who has the credits that they lack to help them move through the process of creating a package, getting it funded, moving into pre-production, post-production, and distribution. They have somebody that can help them walk through that entire process. And usually, line producers like to get paid by the week. Being able to get a budget and a shooting schedule and a consulting producer can save a lot of time and a lot of money and help new producers actually get the information and the support that they need. So that's why we're having this particular interview today. And with that in mind, I'd like to go ahead and ask Jack, can you talk for a few minutes about setting up FilmBudget? You're a working producer and you manage you have a lot of projects that you currently work on professionally, and yet you make yourself available to do budgets for people and to help people in this sort of critical development / early pre-production phase of building their projects. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you decided to make yourself available on that basis?
Sure. Thank you. And thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here speaking with you, and I appreciate the interview. Yes, I produce on my own. I'm a working producer. Over the years, many people have come to me and said, can you do a budget? Can you do a budget for me? And after a while, I decided that when volume reached a certain level, I'm like, okay, this is something I have to prepare for, is people coming to me every day asking me to do a budget. So that's why I created FilmBudget.com. And it took on a life of its own. While I was making movies, in between movies, I found myself with some time to be able to answer that question, and dusted that off when we hit the market crash of the 2009.
Mm.
It dusted that off, and it took on a life of its own. So I'm always happy to help fellow producers move into production. I think a film budget is a fundamental thing, as you mentioned, to know your costs. And so that's how I got it going. It helps everyone I deal with to know what the true cost is, and it's so critical for filmmakers and everyone they approach to know their costs and know exactly what it's going to entail to make their film.
So I think sometimes people, and it's a common misunderstanding, I think, that people have, which is that I have my screenplay and I have my budget, and then the budget doesn't change and the budget doesn't evolve. And in reality, it's a working document. So when you provide a budget to somebody, it's not just like you say, here's your budget, you can pass it across the table. If they need to have changes made or they need to have updates made, they can reach out to you and you'll help them decide how to implement the
A-
changes that's
Absolutely.
required.
The budget, you're right. It's a living document. The budget and schedule is a living document. It changes constantly. When I make films for the studios or independents, I do about 20 budgets before we even get into the green light process. It's an arduous process, constant changes, and things come up, different actor fees, different location fees,
Mm.
equipment fees and such. And so I allow for that when I do a budget for someone. I allow a complimentary period of like 6 months that people can come back to me and make basic changes, as I just mentioned.
Mhm.
If it's a substantial re-envisioning of the production, then I'll address that if that's going to entail extensive work at reimagining the entire budget. But if it's just updates, I'm happy to do that for people complimentary. And generally, it's just an actor's fee, like I said, or equipment rate change or something like that, location change, or even minor script rate changes, which always come up. I'm happy to execute that as part of my process.
So one of the things I think is interesting, and it's funny because I actually like development better than I like production. Much better. Actually, I like it so much better. And the reason it's all the good part, none of the bad part. So, but and one of the things that's interesting is I don't think a lot of people realize that problems are solved in the budgeting process. So if I come to you and I say, look, I have my project, it's a science fiction project, and you do a budget, and then I come back to you later and I go, look, because this is what I would do with a line producer that I hired. I would say, here's my budget, here's my project, I brought it to you, and we've costed it. But now I'm thinking there's these new technologies for that we can use Unreal Engine and virtual production to produce the project. So I don't know if that's cheaper or more expensive. And I don't know I'm sure that you don't know necessarily either for any given project, but you can end up creating two different budgets literally so you can just compare which is going to be more cost effective based upon, because it's not just even the production cost. It's also, can we shoot here in LA? Because
Right.
we don't have to travel. That is a huge time savings. If I can shoot on a green screen or on a sound stage, that even if I'm paying more per day for some things, I'm paying significantly less on travel costs or significantly less. So is it the case that if somebody needs you to problem solve with them and create multiple budgets to figure out what's the best strategy for producing the project, is that something that you can help them do? I mean, you have to charge for it, but is that something that you can help them do?
Yeah, I certainly can do variable budgets, but
Mhm.
generally for every project I approach,
Mm.
I approach each one as if I'm producing it myself. I ask myself, okay, well, how would I do this? What's the best way to do this? What's the most economical way to make this production for the lowest cost and the highest
Mhm.
production value? Where would this shoot? According to the setting of the screenplay,
Mhm.
realizing the intent of the screenplay, where's the best place to shoot this? Where does it make the most sense? Where's the best film tax credit?
Mhm.
Is the jurisdiction oversubscribed with productions where it would be you would not get a cost savings to go there and travel there. Like you said, does it make more sense to shoot it in your hometown or in Los Angeles
Mhm.
because you don't have to pay for travel and everything? So there's all these factors that fall into place: the film tax credit, availability of crew. One thing you have to consider is what are the availability of funds for film tax credits? A lot of
Mhm.
times, like New Mexico or Georgia, can be oversubscribed, and there might not be any money left to pay in that particular year for film
Yeah.
tax credit. So that's taken into, I take that into account. How many productions are in that jurisdiction? Are there any crew available? Are you going to have to fly crew in? That can be an additional cost, and how's that? So I take into impact all those facts and variables when coming out in the designing the production. As far as different technologies, again, I'll just what's the most efficient and makes the most
Mhm.
sense. Or if
Mhm.
someone says, well, I want to use green screen or it has extensive green screen requirements, I'll budget accordingly. But
Cool.
I generally don't do multiple variables, but I'm happy to do it. But
Mhm.
I
Right. So
do with
if somebody says that they want to, then you'll help them do it. But generally speaking, you try to pick right the first time. It's just a
yeah,
question of whether or not they'll follow.
exactly. I just apply my 30 years of experience, say what's
Mhm.
the best way I would think to do this.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
So the other thing you mentioned is that in addition to doing live action production, you also can do animated, and you can budget for animated projects as well. So if
Yes,
somebody wants to do cartoons or if somebody wants to be able to do 3D, like Toy Story kind of content, is that something you can help them with?
absolutely. I've done everything from webisode, minimal animation to 2D animation to 3D Toy Story type animated budgets. Yes.
Cool. And then I think you also mentioned one of the things that there's a lot of, so we're in a weird time right now because it used to be there was a thing called a movie and we saw it in a theater. And then now we watch a lot of our content streaming. And so people are still producing films, but there's also this concept of the independent series. So that's, that's can be a lot more lucrative. You can earn a lot more versus selling a series than you can selling an independent film, given a certain set of parameters because there's more hours to sell and because streaming platforms are so hungry. So, is that your experience that there is such a thing as an independent series that people can sell, like that they can
Absolutely.
produce and sell?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's series development going on now that follows the independent film financing model. And it's done in the US and extensively done across the world, and especially Europe, where you have various sources of financing, independent production companies, studios that put together the financing and present it to a distributor with financing in place. There are split finance deals where an independent company will pay half and the streamer will pay half. The one thing about, as we know about this industry, is in constant change and constant flex, and the models are changing every day. As I always say, the one constant is change. And you're right, the independent film series, independent financing, especially as we go through the Wall Street crunch that is
Mhm.
being imposed on the streamers, they're going to be looking more and more for partners, and they welcome financing, outside financing. So I do work with many clients that do independent series financing, and it's very similar to a film in terms of budgeting, episodic and budgets are built around the series. And I call the foreign financier, it's a common term actually in the industry, is European pudding. It's
Yeah, exactly. There's
different different sources and different all different methods of doing it. But yes, to answer your question.
that is very cool. The You talked about creating budgets across all of these spectrums and the fact that if people sign up with you to get a budget, then there's a certain level of consulting and adjustment that you can do that's included into it. You also do something that's actually separate from that, which is act as an actual consultant or a producer's consultant or a consulting producer. Can you talk a little bit about how that works? Let's say that I contact you and I say, I have money in my hand and I have a budget and I have financing and I have it all. But the agent and manager will not return my call. I swear to God, I have no idea why. And they will not, like, they won't contact me. And I don't know how to fix that. Is because can you help people? Because there are those kinds of stumbling blocks hit people all of the time and they don't know what they're doing wrong. They are doing something wrong. They're somehow or other they something is not working, but they can't figure out what it is. And can you help people? Or if somebody wants to hire a particular staff member, they've got 5 different people that could be line producer. They've got 3 different people that they could use as director. Can they come to you and they can go, "What would you do?" Because I need someone to give me some advice who can actually tell me where I am and what the heck's going on because I can't figure it out.
Sure. Yeah, I do on a very selective basis, I do producer consulting. And basically I work with people that approach me and do want something beyond a budget and a finance plan, is some level of consulting. And I'll talk to them and determine what they need and require, what their goals are. And then I'll create a custom film consulting package for them. And this can vary from something very brief and limited
Mhm.
scale to massive, full on pre-production producing partner, taking them up to the first day of the shooting and fully financed. So basically, I consider my services hiring a producer for
Mhm.
pre-production, and I advise on development, financing, and production. All three are one of
Casting crew and all those kinds of things.
everything, where they were crew up, reach out to directors, reach out to cast, connect with the entertainment attorney, casting directors.
Mhm.
And yeah, again, sometimes it's very limited in scope and expense, and sometimes it, on the other end, can be extensive all the way up to working for months and months to get the film ready to shoot and
Right.
ready for 100% financing. So
So
it ranges, and I do it in a very limited scope because I am a working producer, so I can't take on too many clients in that regard. But in general, yes, I make that available to anyone I work with.
right, so and you have to be selective about that just because when you start working with people that closely, then if they happen to be not perfectly well behaved or strange in any way, and you're consulting with them, it can draw you into craziness. That
Yeah, and it's also just a
involved.
time factor. I
Mhm.
can't oversubscribe myself to be able to help everyone in that regard. Whereas the budgeting and the finance planning I can do and scale up based on my available bandwidth. But if
Mhm.
I can't overpromise too many people at once that I can help and get their movie made on a consulting basis, and I have to focus on making my films as well.
Mhm. Is there when you are there mistakes that new producers make early on in the the process of developing their films that makes it so they're it's almost like it's dead on arrival? One of the ones that I usually see is they just pick a number out of a hat. You're like, I have the script. I feel today I might want to produce $1 million project or a $5 million project or whatever. And then they drive all of their decisions based upon that arbitrary number without knowing whether or not there's a market for that film at that price.
Absolutely. And I take that into consideration and every budget I do. I treat it as my own and
Mhm.
use my experience of what the market is doing and what's the current state of the market. What are sales agents buying? What are networks buying? What's the appropriate budget for a certain script and certain genre, so that nothing is that I create is completely out of whack of what the market would expect. So that's built into the process of assuming that I'm producing this film. And I bring that to the table. What is the current state of the business,
Mhm.
and keep the expectations in line. But create the budget that is the lowest cost, the highest production value. You're always going to want to be optimized and economical. to answer your question about mistake, you just nailed it. Being unrealistic about or not knowing what the true cost would be is and not market aligned is a mistake. Yeah, you need to know exactly what it is. You need a professional budget. I'd say one mistake is maybe not realizing that everyone you hand your budget to has seen hundreds and hundreds of budgets, and they can just take one glance at it and know if it's viable. And you're doing, whoever did it knows what they're doing. I can look at a budget in 10 seconds and tell you if that's a viable budget that was done by a professional. And so can all the distributors and financiers and sales agents, et cetera. So I'd say submitting an amateur budget. I always say that the budget is a reflection of you as a filmmaker.
Mhm.
And also it's a roadmap to the production. So when you're getting a budget made, what you're getting is not just a number, but you're getting how to make the film. It's a roadmap and it's schedule. It starts with a schedule and a breakdown. And it's how is this film going to be made? How long do you need personnel and equipment for? Where's the ideal location, film tax credit, et cetera. So having those facts on board is critical, and not having them is, I'd say, the biggest error.
So do you actually use help people with the financial forecasts that sort of support the budget as well? Because that's so when people are developing, I don't think a lot of people that are really new to producing, they don't realize you can't just take your script and your budget around town and get people to write you checks for random values. They don't realize that you have to set up a company because that has to be there to hold the money. And they don't realize that they have to have entertainment attorneys and they don't to secure the screenplay ownership they don't realize that they have to have securities attorneys to help them raise the money to put the private placement together or to do regulation CF or whatever they're doing. They don't realize that these pieces have to be in place. And a key thing that they don't realize is the financial forecasts and the fact that they have to be, it's not just like you get to make up a number about how much you think the film's going to be worth. You actually have to document why you think it's going to be worth that amount of money. And you have to use other films to do that. Can you talk a little bit about can you help people create those kinds of that kind of documentation as well?
Absolutely. I create film finance plans as well. What I do is a film finance business plan, which is a proprietary document, and it's created for non-industry potential investors and for industry investors. The film finance business plan is extensive. It details a great deal about the project and the filmmakers and the market and the genre of the film. And I do comparables and projections on what similar films are making in the market currently and recently have made. That gives an investor a somewhat idea. While you can't predict what any film will do, we'll give them an indication of what they might expect a similar film to do in the marketplace. In addition to that, I do a 2-page finance plan, which is for industry professionals who don't need all that information. They just want the hard facts. Basically, an investor wants to know, how much does it cost? How do I get my money back?
Mm.
And for savvy industry people, they just want to see what's the equity requirement, what's the anticipated potential foreign sales contingent, and what other financing sources are, what's a film tax credit. And so it's very simplified in that and how funds are dispersed and how people will recoup their money. So yeah, that's very important. You should know that you're in alignment with what the market expectations are for the project, whether it's film or television. And so yeah, create the film budget and schedule. Separately, I do the film finance plan and I do the film production consulting.
Cool. And when so just to confirm, let's say somebody has a project and it's like a $200,000 documentary. And then let's say somebody else has a project that's $2 million horror film and somebody else has a project that's a $5 million drama, and somebody else has a project that might be $10 million, but it's an independent series. Are you comfortable working at all that level? Or do you think it only makes sense if people are doing a project of a specific over a specific amount?
No, I work in everything from 25,000, 50,000 shorts, dollar shorts up into $200 million movies and everything in between. I,
Mhm.
I budget every big budget, low budget, micro budget. I've experienced doing them all.
Mhm.
Enjoy doing them all.
Cool. So it's so people can even people can do you recommend that people that are just starting out, if they've never produced films before, do you think it makes sense for them to do short films or ultra micro budget features and then step up to doing larger projects? Or do you think it makes sense to just go wherever, whatever script they happen to have in hand takes them?
As a director, I would say you should definitely do short form and get some experience with that and some credits before anyone's going to trust you directing it. Producing is a little bit different. Depends on the project and the screenplay. It might be a $10 million picture, and that in that case, you want to partner with experienced producers. You don't want to go into that all on your own, but it's more important that a director get credits under their belt directing so that people see you can direct. For example, I'm working with a writer director right now who I'm pushing as a first time director, but I encouraged him to go and produce a short. And he's just done that. And I'm looking forward to seeing the cut of it. But now he has a short form project that people can look at and say, oh, okay, he can direct. So
It's interesting because you've worked with some of the highest end talent in the entertainment industry, like Kevin Costner or Adam Sandler or Ben Affleck, or in you've when you're working with as you work higher up with higher and higher, more how do you say more and more name talent, higher end name talent as you climb that ladder. Uh, do you think it's the case that it's really even feasible for new writer producer? I mean, that you're saying they can come on board as a producer because they've got a great script, but and they may have money, access to funds that can help them actually bring a project together. But they may want, if they don't have those credits, then they might want to actually hire a director to work for them because the talent will trust that director. When
absolutely. That's a key factor. Yeah. Name talent want to work with name directors. Absolutely. Unless there are exceptions all the time. If they just think it's just a fantastic screenplay that blows their mind and they love the material and they want to do it and they believe in the writer, director, or first time director or whoever, they believe that they can pull it off and they can convince other people they're going to do it. But that's an uphill push. Really, name in general, they want to work with name directors.
Mhm.
So, or at least people with experience. So on the director side, yeah, you want to be able to demonstrate that you've directed something before, whether it's a short form or webisodes or a television show or something that you can demonstrate you can deliver a project, you know how to shoot it.
Mhm.
Whereas, like I said, the producer has a bit more flexibility. You can always partner up with other producers. You don't necessarily have the opportunity as a director.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. Do you, m- I, in talking to a lot of independent or new producers, they don't seem to understand, and I guess it makes sense because it's weird. It's just an entertainment industry thing, but they don't realize that it's common for a producer to bring other producers onto a project to help them with specific tasks on the project that they're not
Absolutely.
comfortable with.
Absolutely. I always get a chuckle when people say, why are there so many producers on this project in the credits? And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of hats and it's a lot of jobs. And
Mhm.
yes, it is incumbent upon new producers to team up with a producer with experience. It'll open doors for them, get their calls answered, answer a lot of questions for them. There's a lot to know and a lot to understand. And yeah, for a new producer should definitely try and partner up with a producer, whether it's hiring them or it's just partnering with them, whatever the case may be. Trying to do your first feature all on your own is a bit of a challenge.
As part of your production consulting, do you help people with or can you advise people on the fundamentals of actually safely and legally setting up their production because you and I both know that they do need to have an entertainment attorney. I think people try to go, people try to skip a lot of steps. They have
Yeah.
to have an entertainment attorney. If they're going to raise money from investors, take money from investors, they have to have a securities attorney. And er, you can help them early on, but at some point they're going to have to get themselves an actual line producer because somebody actually has to start picking up those tasks and rolling into the actual process of pre-production. Like you're going to get to a point where somebody actually has to go places and do things.
Absolutely. Crew needs to be hired. The company needs to be formed. Financiers need to be approached. Absolutely.
Mhm. But you actually help people with, so can you advise people if they ask you for a budget, you just provide them for the budget because they're just they might just be in the earliest stages of figuring out what they're going to do. And they may be paying for that out of pocket because whether it's $4,000 or $10,000, it's kind of like a liquor store owner paying to get an appraisal or to get an inspection on a building that they're planning on buying. It's the very first step in, but you very swiftly, if you decide you're going to go forward, you do have to actually start rolling into creating the company because you have to start you're going to start hiring people and making agreements. And that means you have to have a company entity that's doing that. Some company is
Absolutely.
going to sign their name on some contract.
Yes.
That should not be
Absolutely.
you that signs your name.
Absolutely. No, there are costs, just as you said, as you would with building a building, there are development costs. When you build a building, you need permitting, you need
Mhm.
inspections, you need surveyors, you need architects. So yeah, there are development costs. There are very many similarities to the building business. But it starts with the budget, knowing what the costs are, and that the budget will tell you what you should expect to pay for an attorney,
Mhm.
casting director. These are development costs that will be reimbursed and put in the budget that the filmmaker will realize and be reimbursed for once the production is financed. But yeah, there are costs to undertake, including budget, entertainment attorney, casting director, setting up for LLC formation, securities attorney. And so part of the process is you know, obtaining development costs. Yeah, a lot of people I work with, this is out of pocket costs. I'm very, very understanding about the process of development, having done it for myself over 25 plus years. And I know it's a daunting process, but it's one that we bear as producers.
It's kind of our stake in the game.
Yeah,
Like, that's the other
yeah,
thing is I think people say a lot of times they don't, and it makes sense. I think a lot of people that move into become a producer, they grow into it because they've been a screenwriter before and they've had projects made, or they've been an assistant director or a director. Like it's a natural evolution for them to go into being a producer, but that's it. I think sometimes they don't understand it's a fundamentally entrepreneurial role. And that's the essence of the entrepreneurial deal is we take the initial risk.
yes,
That's
absolutely.
that's the job that we do. We're the engineers that take the initial risk. We're the ones that go, yeah, I see this. I can see how this is going to work, or I'm going to make this work. I'm going to engineer a solution such that this film gets made. So I think a lot of times when people have not had the opportunity to run a business before and have not started businesses before, they don't recognize that there's that startup cost. And it's an interesting thing because on the one hand, I feel like I've run businesses my whole life. And on one hand, I feel like the budget is a normal business expense. I have the screenplay somehow or other, and gonna get the budget done for it. But I may not go forward with it. I was telling you, I have done budgets on a million projects I have decided not to do. I've just because you go, that looks like hassle. So I kind of feel like the part where I do the budget is why this is like the budget makes me decide whether or not I want to do it. And it's an expensive thing, but it's a little bit like me deciding that I want to buy that liquor store or I want to buy that apartment building. I have to have some way to actually look at the cost of it. And
Absolutely.
the first cost assessment is always a risk because you just don't know if you want to do it or if you can do it or you have the wherewithal to do it. So I think people a lot of times feel like they're a real failure when they decide to do the script and do the budget and then they go, you know what? I don't want to do this. And it's yeah, I know. That's what a producer does. They go, no. I thought I
No,
would
you have to make a decision. Absolutely. Is it viable? Is
right,
bringing this film to light viable? Is it just going to cost way too much? What's
right.
on the page to produce for what the market will bear these days?
And also how many years is it gonna cost? Because that's the other thing. Can you because one
Yeah.
of the things you do is the schedule and you can give people an approximation of how long it's not just the shooting schedule. There's a thing called post, which is the other thing I hate. Post production sucks. So I really only like one part. Anyway, but there's the development part, which is a good part, and then they're expensive, doesn't make money but good. And then there's production and there's post production. So it can be the case. It's not just a matter of you get a sense of all of those things when you are doing the budget. That's how you get a metric that says, okay, this is how much it's going to cost, not just in dollars, but in time. And y- you have to decide, do I love this thing 3 years worth? Do I love this thing so much that I don't mind not seeing money really for 3 years or 2 years or whatever the thing's going to be? The smaller the budget, maybe the faster it usually goes because there's no money to make it take a long time. Then you can actually, then you can get paid at some point more sooner. One hopes. But
Abs- Absolutely. No, it takes a great deal of passion to be in this industry. And yeah, you have to be dedicated as a producer
mhm,
to see it through throughout the years. I've always said it's a solid year of my life.
every
Film,
single film is a solid year.
yeah,
Is that from funding all the way through production? Or
if you're lucky, if you're lucky.
is it the case that as the films get more expensive, the whole process takes longer? If 5 million to film a 1 million versus a 5 million versus a 10 million.
Yes, yes, because the bigger it gets, the more risk there is to the financiers. So the bigger level of talent you need attached, and it's very hard to get name talent and directors attached, and it takes a great deal of time to dealing with the agents, and the actors are busy and the directors are busy. So yeah, as you scale up, yes, it takes a bit more time. Financing gets harder. If you're doing $1 million picture in that neighborhood or less, or a bit more, that access to that financing might come a lot quicker than because you don't have to have the higher caliber of talent to justify that budget.
Mhm. So that's one of the things that's another factor that a producer takes it takes into account when they decide, okay, I've got a script. I thought I wanted to do it. I may not want to do it based upon how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. And is it my experience is that almost every producer has this drawer full of projects that they're waiting to do. The time's not right yet for this particular project. Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've often found that I'm way ahead of the game on judging what might be ready for the industry, and then by the time I get around to doing it, it's either currently
Mhm,
happening all over the place, or maybe even a little bit beyond past me.
mhm,
That's happened many times, but yeah, it's a lot of projects. And like you said, some you let go for
mhm,
many reasons. You just decide, oh, this is going to be too much work, or
mhm,
I don't like the people I'm working with, or I just don't, I'm not passionate about it at the moment. You have to be so passionate about it and so dedicated to it that you just have to believe in it 1,000%. Yeah, I have many projects I'm constantly developing. And you have to have many because for
mhm,
one reason or another, one might get stuck in the mud and you want to
mhm.
move forward with the next.
Or
It's
sometimes you have
all
them in
about
parallel.
momentum. So
Sometimes you have them in parallel and you go, "I don't know which one of these is gonna go." And if they
yeah,
both go, it's gonna be a hassle, but you know,
absolutely. No, yeah, it's always good to have several irons in the fire. Absolutely. In
and
different stages.
That's another thing I don't think people a lot of times realize. I'll have new producers come up and they'll talk to me and they go, I just have, the thing is, I have so many projects. And I go, yeah, that's how you know you're a producer. Because that's what we do. We get 4 or 5 things and they're like courses. And we go, that's the fastest one this week. I'll work on it. Because you don't know what the options are. So
I
when
used to have a running joke. You want to get the next one out before you want to be producing the next one before the last one comes out. You just want to stay step ahead of your distribution.
that's really smart. And I think people, and if you're going to be a producer for a living, that's what you have to do. So
Yeah.
there's a difference. Uh, I often, and I might be wrong, it's just everybody gives their own advice, but I often tell people, I go, look, if you want a good project to do, when you're passionate about something, do a documentary. Documentaries are fun projects. They're so
And they're
straightforward.
hot right now. They're very hot.
And there you can interview people. That's easy. And then there's stock footage. It's just there's nothing. And then the B footage. There's so much wonderfulness about it. And when
But they are very difficult and they take a long time.
they can, the way some people do them, I think a lot of times you should look for the easy documentaries. But anyway,
Sure.
it looks for don't pick something hard. Well, do something about this. Your local church that has a 200-year-old pipe organ. That's a church. It's pipe organ. How far can
Sure. What could go wrong?
because it's easy. But the advantage to doing something like that is, one, you get a good credit. Two, it's easy and fast. And three, there is a market. As you pointed out, there's a market for that kind of content. And it has the advantage of being something that it's straightforward and easy to do, which can get you into the game. And also a lot of
Yeah.
times it's not union in the sense, if I'm spending $200,000 on that thing and I'm hiring a cameraman and I'm interviewing people, I'm not bringing in name talent unless maybe at the end I decide I want to have a celebrity narrator. So you can help people on those kinds of projects as well. You can say, hey, this is the budget for this is what I recommend to make things better and easier, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to circle back a
Mhm.
question you asked earlier, where do I see
Mhm.
people make mistakes? I always advise people, except for the development costs that we talked
Mhm.
about, your budget, potentially your finance plan,
Mhm.
your entertainment attorney, initial costs, casting director, initial costs, deposit for key cast if it's required by the agent. Aside from those basic development costs, when you're moving into spending production costs, I advise from like, it makes common sense, but I see it a lot. Do not spend any money you raise until you have 100% financing. That's a sure recipe for disaster. I see that a lot of time. People are like, oh, I'm hiring this location. I've hired this a piece of equipment, spending money in this. It's like, not until you're 100% funded,
So
because
someone's going to want their money back if it doesn't work out.
someone's going to want their money back. And if you don't complete that film, you have to deliver. And that's why it's critical to know your costs and know exactly what you need from your investors so you can deliver. And that's the key question. The quick key element is you deliver. And so, yeah, that- you'd be surprised how many people I find that like they're spending money beyond the basic development costs. Like,
It's again, it's one of the reasons to start small. So there's a
yeah,
benefit there's really a benefit of coming up through the ranks.
right.
It's it's almost like a recipe for failure to decide you're going to skip that developmental stage because you don't want the first time you're on set to be a time when you're totally unprepared because you've never been on set before or because you've
I
been
spent years and years getting coffee.
yeah. And you know what the best part about uh getting coffee is that when the things are blowing up, you're just the guy getting coffee.
Exactly.
What?
But no, what's great about being a PA on the set or an assistant of some sort in some department is it's especially production departments. I've always loved about it was that you get to see everything happening. You get to learn from every department. You get your eyes and ears in the entire production. People ask me what's a good way to start a business, and a lot of people think they can just slot in the top level sometimes. I'm like, no, everybody starts out at the bottom and works their way up. I did. Everyone I know I did. I did because you need that experience. You need to being able to see everything going on in a production. So it's very important to just get on a production, not as the producer, but as some element of the crew where you get to see on someone else's production and someone else's dollar investment, what's going on, and acclimate yourself to learning, which most people do. And the beauty of today's world is you can just pick up a camera and start shooting it yourself and get a good idea of.
And I think I usually tell people doing I most of the people that are in my workshops, one of the things that's actually really good about them is they tend to be, um, they're not like 18-year-olds, they're not film students. They're like, a lot of times they're seasoned professionals. So they might be 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60 years old. So a lot of times they have the work experience. And so I usually tell them just start really small, do a short film, they have a lot of the business skills, but they have to get into the groove of actually doing it, and they have to have the opportunity to.
Likewise. Same here. And I liaise with a bunch of people in that regard. And then also I have some very serious professionals who may be in or outside of the business
Mhm.
that want to make it so they want to produce it. They wrote the screenplay or they optioned it or control it otherwise. And they want to make it, and they want to make a big production and they want to produce it, but they need advice and wherewithal to move it forward. So yeah, and I work with people in all elements, people very experienced business people and people who are new to the experience. So
But it's really, like I said, one of the things that's interesting is that the fact that you actually do the film budgets and then you also make yourself available when it makes sense to be a and it fits your schedule and their temperament to be a consulting producer, because I think not that it's more difficult than it has been in the past to be able to find what used to be called a mentor or a seasoned producer to be able to come up with. And I think that being able to have somebody to turn to and go, I have no idea what the hell's going on.
right.
Something weird's happening, but I can't figure out what it is for the life of me. And then, what you can say, what are you sending those people? Why aren't they taking your calls? And you go, I
Right.
send them this. And he goes, nobody in their right mind is going to answer that email you just sent right there. No wonder things have gone to hell. Right. I mean, it's like that kind of feedback can be really important.
No, and that's why I work with people. I talk to them, say, have a conversation. What do you need help with? How can I help? What factors would be helpful for you? And then I do a custom package for them and say, okay, I can help you with this. I can. The one thing I don't do is pitch agents
Why should you? It's
finances
because
for them.
the thing about pitching, and I don't think a lot of people understand it, is that if you've got a good budget and you've got a good shooting schedule and you've got a good finance plan, and like, the reason you're developing all those documents is so when you go into pitch, it's easy.
Yeah,
It's easy because you actually know what the hell you're talking about, because you are really excited about the project because you know how it's going to come together. And I think that
exactly.
people
And
don't.
what it gives you a leg up to have
Right.
the documents, the financial documents. It tells someone you're thinking about the
Mhm.
business side of it, and it gives you a leg up versus just going in there with a screenplay. So you have a budget, you have a finance plan, or one or the other, or both, and it tells people on the business side you're dealing with. I understand the business. I have a
Mhm.
roadmap for the production. I know the viable cost of the
Mhm.
production, and it's just a great lever versus just sending in a screenplay. It
I
puts
would,
you, I like to say it puts you ahead of the line. It
and
puts-
I would also say I would be really leery of working with a producer who can't pitch their own project,
yeah,
because I would be wondering, as it turns out, I am the least difficult person you're going to talk to, because you're going to be on set telling all those people what to do. And if you can't even tell me what you're going to do for an
right.
hour, how are you going to tell them what to do? Because you're going to be there with them for days.
Absolutely.
Right?
But I also work with people. I do pitch decks. I don't,
You help them create the documents to pitch. So you just
yeah,
help them structure it. But you just don't go into the meeting and say, oh, I'm pitching this project for my friend Ted here.
yeah, because I'm a working producer, I can't be contacting agents and financiers all the time for clients. It would reduce my viability.
I get
But
it.
what I
Also,
do is I advise people who to talk to, how to
yeah.
approach them, prepare them for that, help them with an entertainment attorney or casting director So go through the process, and I will work with them if they wish to during that process and answer the questions as they come
You can help
up.
them help coach them so they can get through a pitch. I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
just even if you did pitch, I don't think it would be good because I just don't think anybody would talking is like a lot of the job.
To be honest, it's not my forte. Like you said, I let the script and the budget speak for it.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually don't mind pitching. I can talk for days. So we should. There's a bunch of questions that have come through. So with your permission, I'll just go ahead and move through them.
Sure.
Uh, And then one of the things is a technical question. If the U.S. tax code used to have that thing called Section 181, which had certain qualified film and television deductions, so that if you produced your film inside the United States, you could basically take that, you and your investors, or your investors can take that investment as a deduction from their taxes. Do I have that right, or do you want to explain it to me?
Yeah, that question always comes up, and it's there's a million, like the confusion with tax credit, film tax credits, people outside the industry. The Section 181 is constantly misunderstood and misrepresented. But the quick answer is the tax law changed about 2 years ago, and that was basically the benefit that was in place for that has been eliminated.
Mhm,
It's not really viable for independent indie film finance investor.
mhm,
What it has now been changed to is for people that acquire films, complete films. Basically, it does, and I'm not an expert on the subject, but what my understanding is, it allows basically a write down on an investor's investment in the first year versus several years, um, which they can do anyway under other uh,
for their
taxation.
tax code.
Yeah. So the foremost, if you want to know the foremost expert on the subject, is a guy named Skylar Moore, and he does articles for Forbes. And I've actually gone to his presentations. And basically, I went to one after the law changed a couple of years ago, and I talked to him about it. He just, like, no, don't even bring it up.
It's not what it used to be. It's not that thing it used to be.
It used to be, yeah, it used to be. No, I have used it on a film where just for taxation purposes for the investors, it had something to do with before or once it's distributed, there was a benefit
But the
for
whole law has changed such that if you don't finish your film, you can't deduct the partial film that you created. That's a huge
right.
change, is the fact that if you don't hit that finish line and actually get
Right.
it in to sell.
The mistake of it, the problem why I don't even address it anymore in that is it's been misrepresented. There were these companies that were saying, oh, if you do Section 181 income combination with the film tax credit, you can get a 50% return on your investment. It just wasn't accurate. And its quick answer is don't present it to investors that you're going to get. What they were doing was they were saying, oh, you'll get a 35% return on your investment because you can write off your taxes. You can write off the expense in the first year. It's not a tax
That's not how
benefit.
that works.
Yeah, it's an accelerated, in its
Depreciation.
original form, it was an accelerated write down.
Mhm.
Whereas now that only applies for people who are acquiring complete films, not individual and non-active investors.
Wow.
I, I don't propose it. I don't suggest people propose it.
And again, the other thing that I tell people is you gotta, that's why you need to have a securities attorney because you're not even allowed to really tell, you can talk to investors about certain aspects of the thing and suggest things, but really part of your job, you have a PPM and you have a securities attorney and you're talking about things, but you're not supposed to talk about their tax situation or promise them specific because it gets too close to making a promise that you can't necessarily fulfill because you don't know everything about their tax situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know? So somebody else asks the okay, the next question we have is a line producer the person who tells you how much your wild ideas are going to cost? generally speaking, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great break. The budget is a representation of the film, the cost of making the film by someone who has experience doing it. It's a roadmap to the film, gives you a final number and every dollar spent on the film. So every category, like these budgets can run 30 to 70 plus pages. It's every dime in every department for every piece of equipment, every piece of crew, every crew member, whether how long you need them for, anticipated cast costs for that budget. And every budget will have a talent fee that it can bear and is what is required for that risk on the investment. At a certain investment risk, you need a certain level of talent to justify it. But yes, to answer the question, absolutely. The line producer is the nuts and bolts person
Who
that
goes, no,
knows the costs of
that's
bringing
you're
a
not
film
getting
to
a
life.
crane for this film. There'll be no crane. At no point will there be a crane that you have.
Right.
So, and you don't, if you're a filmmaker or a student filmmaker and you don't have access to such a person, then you would recommend that people do what people have done in the past, which is one of the reasons you actually can help people who are student filmmakers or lower filmmakers. One of the benefits you provide is that you can give them a budget for less than what a normal line producer, a full-time line producer would actually charge them. If they don't have access to you, is it just the case that they have to start going through the process of learning how to make a budget, like from books or?
I vary what I charge to based on the scale of the project. So obviously if it's something very low budget and a very micro budget,
Mhm,
charge a lot less than if it's a 10, 20, $30 million picture.
mhm.
And I try and keep my rates as low as possible because I understand that it's the cost of self-funding is, is it's painful. And, but what I also do is I offer a service that I call movie budget vetting. That if
Mhm.
someone has already done their budget and they want to come to me and I review it and critique it. And
Oh, that's
sometimes
interesting.
I might even say, okay, give me the budget and I'll fix it
Let me
for you.
fix this thing. This is broken.
Yeah. And I don't do a great deal of that, but it's just
So
something I offer.
if somebody's a student filmmaker and they think they've got the budget right because they've looked at a bunch of different samples or whatever, and they've done their research and they have the script in the budget, and they can actually hire you as a consultant to basically give them a critique on the budget and
Absolutely.
what your thoughts are. That's
Yeah.
actually probably a good way for someone to learn how to budget, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I just found it's very helpful for someone that comes along and says, I've already done my budget. And I'll say, let me see it. And I'll tell you if you've done it.
Yeah, I think being able to double check some crazy person's budget is probably a good idea. I've seen crazy budgets go by, and I'm like, wouldn't it be nice if there were any? You're paying people, and you have to put a number where it says "pay people."
But it is good to know how to do to answer your question. Yes, it does behoove a student filmmaker to learn what the costs are and make an attempt at it. If hiring a producer is not on the table at the moment.
That makes sense. So another question we have is, this is a question you may say it's like not something that you can answer because it's complicated, but help us understand where to accommodate fringes in the items besides those of the above the line guild items that are available.
I think I understand the question. Yeah, that's funny enough. I said not a ridiculous question. I just answered one for a very experienced film financier out of the UK the other day. Now, there's basically two types of fringes. There's United States government fringe and there's union fringe. And, for employers, you have to pay FUI, SUI, Medicare, workers' comp. FUI is federal unemployment insurance. SUI is state unemployment insurance. That varies by every state. Workman's comp, Medicare. These are all facts because we don't have, in the United States, we don't have nationalized health care. It's incumbent on employers to contribute and employees contribute. On top of that, there are union fringes, and these are for the union health plans, whether it's SAG, WGA, or DGA, or IATSE. They have their union fringes. And these vary again by jurisdiction, by state, and by budget level. But they generally run about 18% for the government ones and about 22% and higher for the union rates. And that varies. That's why New York and California are the most expensive places to shoot. Not only are the Financier budget rates the highest, but the state costs are higher as well.
Wow. Well done. I'm impressed by that. Um, so do you, Nathan asked, what are the traits of someone that you take on as a production consultant? Do you have a sort of a checklist, or is it just based upon you need to see the project and the screenplay and you need to have bios for the people that you'd be supporting, or how does that work?
I do it on a case by case business. I'm very selective on who I do consulting with, as I mentioned, because just I can't oversubscribe my time, and it depending on what the level of commitment is. If it's a small engagement, and I do it each one, analyze it, do a custom consultancy package for everyone that asks for it. And no, it's really not dependent on the kind of person or the kind of project, unless I just see something is completely off the wall, or I'm like,
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
yeah, it's just not gonna work for some other. But for the most part, I entertain the concept and liaise with the person, the filmmaker, and say, okay, what are you trying to achieve? What do you need help with? How can I help? How does that dovetail with what your needs
Is it a
are?
little bit like when a lawyer takes on a case? They don't take every case. You come to them and you outline what your situation is, and then they decide. Is it like that? Where you,
Yeah, yeah. And I do a wide range. Some people say, okay, I just need an hour of your time or a couple hours of your time. Some people say, no, some of my engagements are weeks and
like,
months.
I want a weekly meeting, or I want to have a couple, 2 hours a week set aside in case I want to talk to you about. Just I don't want to get off track. So I need.
Absolutely. And I'm very general with them. I don't really lock it down because I like to give everyone a lot of flexibility on it. They just know I'm here and
Mhm.
I'm working and developing the project with them. Some people have taken me off the market for 6 to 12 months. They just want my full attention and they want to compensate me for that. Other
Mhm.
people say, I only have a little money and I just need help with this. And so I'm very flexible about it.
That's
And
cool.
I'm not like particular. There isn't
It's not a profile that you have to
there
follow.
isn't a certain profile. No, it's just I might be able to answer these questions in
Mhm.
10 minutes. It might take 3 months to deliver what the intent of the engagement is. So it's very flexible. It's very broad. And no, it's really just a matter of let's discuss what you need and I'll discuss what that's going to take on my end as far as commitment and see if that fits in your budget.
And you have a contract, or or if they're a producer, they may have an employment contract. You guys just work out or that contract governs the consulting services that you're providing and specifies how the fees work and when payments are going to happen and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. It's a standard contracting kind of.
Yes.
Sarita actually is a writer producer in her own right. She asked, what type of projects are you yourself looking to produce these days?
It's a good question. I right these days, I'm as one of the projects I'm doing right now, I'm looking at very commercial projects because uh, I've done my dramas, my comedy dramas, I've done my environmental documentary. So I like to think I've served the arts world and I helped save the planet. So now
I'm with you now. I'm going to.
commercial projects.
So would actually, if somebody had a project that did require, or you thought did require virtual production, is that something you'd be interested in? Just because it give you an opportunity to dive deep.
Yes,
In
yeah, and as I'm diving into that world, it's very cost prohibitive at this time. It's really not.
It's
Uh,
crew. It's an availability of location and crew. If you're doing it on those big LED screens, there's only a few people that can actually do the thing. That's the issue.
Absolutely, but it's ramping up and massive accelerating. Everyone is seeing that it's very viable tech for making films. And COVID really pushed it into the forefront. But the acceleration of the creation of these spaces is astonishing.
It
Every,
is.
every jurisdiction is coming. The problem is they haven't really nailed down the individual independent film costs for it. So they're getting to that point. Right now, we're still in the Mandalorian 1899 world using it.
Yeah.
And so it will come down. I mean, there are, like we discussed, day rates for going into a stage, and there's different levels of virtual
Right.
production.
There's the green screen stage, which, I mean, for example, I think Moses has a turnkey, buy it out of the box, includes the cameras and the servers and provides training. And I know it's under, I feel strongly that it's under $500,000. I think it might be like closer to 300, and two camera solution.
Mhm.
And I think it's green screen. Last time I checked. So
I am
and so the
focusing
thing is
on,
that's like a basically their solution. It's go buy it in the box, and actually they rent those solutions and they rent crew as well. But what's interesting to me about that is there's so much. It's very fertile ground for independent films, assuming that you can get somebody to actually run the kit for you. That's really that's the big thing. Is it's like there's an expertise gap. It's not equipment so much as expertise, I think.
yeah, takes a lot of personnel, a lot of technology. Absolutely. And it's
Somebody who
complicated.
actually
It's
knows
very
what they're doing.
complicated. You have to do everything in advance. There's no post in that world.
There's no post, and there's no you don't have to pay the hammering guys, and you can hire people overseas to create the models for you easily.
Right.
And it's just Unreal Engine, so it's just a bunch of 3D geometry. It's actually not rocket science, but the hard part is there's a virtual production supervisor who has to be involved, and there's the good ones are few and far between, and so you have to
Yeah.
get one and then make it do stuff.
Well, it sounds like you probably know even more than I do about the subject, but it's integrated, everything integrated all at once. You know,
It just
your
happens
visual
in camera,
effects,
right?
your costume design, your production design, your post production. It's everything all at once versus
Actually, I think it's really just for the most part, people are just using it for backgrounds. The cool thing is you can put a digital character right side by side. One of the reasons I like the green screen solution better is you can put a digital character side by side with a living actor and interact them.
yeah.
It's just too cool. And I like the fact you can make space anywhere you want to, and you can make it has you can have the wind blow and the leaves drop it. So there's cool things about it, but the reason I just asked is because I think that it has the advantage of being able to lower budgets, and you can shoot here at home instead of traveling.
And
Um,
interestingly enough, we're almost getting to a point with technology where we won't even need green screens. It'll be
I think so too. Exactly. I can't wait for that. It's so funny. People keep pointing to these LED screens, and I'm like, you're going to be really sad because in about 3 years, you're not going to need that thing because the camera will be able to sense how far away the actors are.
we'll- basically the technology will be able to duplicate the concept of green screen without the green screen being there.
So I think I'm a gearhead. Anyway, so another question. So is there any particular kinds that you're looking for commercial projects? And by that, do you mean mysteries and thrillers and horror, or is there a particular?
Well, let me back up a bit. I'm not really in the business of looking for projects. If someone has a project, what am I really looking for?
Mhm.
Something that's fully financed with A-list talent.
Excellent. I think that is a smart thing to look for, but that's actually a really good answer.
No, I have plenty of projects for development, so I don't
Yeah,
solicit.
you don't have time to go off looking
I
for.
don't solicit pitches, and I do receive about 100 a day. But
Mhm.
no, what I am personally at this moment in my life, I'm looking for a very commercial, market ready project, ideally with main cast attached and with
Mhm.
some element of financing attached. That really gets my interest. The, the development process I can do on my own with my own projects. I don't need to start from flat footed with
Ground zero.
a screenplay.
That sounds smart. Uh, let's see. So when you're helping people get financing for their film, or you're advising them, do you give them suggestions on where to find investors, or in other words, y- your development services, you don't say, "Oh, okay, you should be looking at dentists," or or reach out to these people. That's not the that's you can tell them that they need this much money and that they need this much private investment, but you don't necessarily tell them sources for that investment, or is that
No,
something you don't?
it takes on many different hats, as many different hats as the business of producing entails. And one of them is, yeah, what are the sources of financing? So I'll look at what the project is. Like, okay, if I'm producing this film, where would I go for money? And I will advise people, say, okay, here's sources. For example,
Mhm,
I had one client that wanted me to consult with them, and I gave them very specific finance companies that finance that kind of picture.
mhm.
I said I prepared something, and maybe I'll send that out as an attachment, or you can send. I can.
Well, no, you're getting that. You're getting so as we discussed previously, you're getting everybody's email address
Okay,
right after
great.
the
So I'll
call, so
just send it
you
out
can
as an
follow up.
attach. I'll send it out as an attachment, and thanking everybody for tuning in.
Mhm,
But but getting back to the concept of the budget, in approaching financiers, it gives you an idea, and it more importantly gives them an idea. So you're not approaching people that it doesn't fit their model.
oh,
There's no reason to be approaching a lot of people that won't do $1 million film. There's
mhm,
no reason to approach people that do $1 million film that it's a $10 million film. Knowing your budget helps you narrow down who you're going to approach for, as well as distributors. Their
mhm,
acquisition budgets. This might not fit their model. They all have a model. What they
mhm,
do, they're not just all open to every sort of financing in the world. They have a space they work in. Like in a lot of industries, they have their niche. That we do $3 to $5 million work. We do $5 to $10 million dramas. We do $500,000 to $1.5 million independent film. So knowing your costs helps you relate to the finance. Getting back to your question, yes, that's part of one of the things I'll consult on. I'll say, okay, what
wow,
is the film? What's the budget scale? And what are good companies that would attach to it? And the material matters too. Let's say it's something about a certain disease.
mhm,
There are companies out there and organizations that would like to fund this specific disease
mhm.
project.
Wow, that is really cool. That is
And grants and there are subsidies and programs. So as I'm monitoring these constantly, I can go, okay, great. Here's a list of grants that would be applicable to this project.
that is very cool. So, just a quick note to everybody: if you want your question answered, go ahead and put it in by clicking on the Q&A thing, and I'll make sure that it gets asked. But we're not going to be taking live questions because it's a little too hard to wrangle. Let's see. Cool. So someone says, we're streaming our feature Lead the Way on Prime Video, Comcast, Cox Cable, Spectrum, and other platforms starting tomorrow. And we'll be shooting a spin-off of that feature later this year. Is that something you could help us with? So that if somebody has a project, they can approach you, and if they've got budget attached and all those kinds of things, then they can reach out to you with that information. You can decide whether or not it's something you can assist them with from some perspective. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. And when you talk about a commercial project, from your perspective, it's basically you want something that's already got it's something mystery, thriller, horror, whatever, and something that's got commercial high value commercial in terms of it's likely to make a lot of money at the box office, and it needs to have elements attached to it, named some name talent, some budget, etc. It has to be ready to go, not brand new out of the box. Correct?
For me at this time, yeah, I'm looking for something with a somewhat of a named director, some element of financing
Mhm.
beyond soft money and or distribution in place or something beyond just a screenplay. Yeah, I have I have that
I
part
have
covered.
screenplays my own.
Right?
If you were starting with a screenplay, you have a box of screenplays.
I
There's
do.
no reason for me to start with your screenplay when I have a
I
box.
do. I do. And I can barely get through the scripts I want to develop, let alone take
I
on
understand.
many more scripts. But no, if there's elements attached to a director of note, financing in place or looking promising, I'd be interested in hearing about that.
That sounds that makes total sense to me. Let's see. When it comes to somebody asked specifically about an animated series, what are the pieces of a pitch package for an animated series? Is it but the scripts and script budget, shooting schedule or production schedule? Do they also need to create a X number minute sample video or so people can see what the animation looks like? Or can you do it just basically using drawings of the characters without having to create a sizzle reel that shows the animation?
No, I'd say for an animated TV series, a pitch deck would be good, would be
Uh,
the ideal thing. A lot of the streamers these days are not even reading scripts. They want to see the pitch deck, and if they like it, they'll ask for the pilot script. You don't need to make it'd be good to develop artwork of what the animation would look like. Absolutely. And that can go into a pitch deck, but I, I wouldn't worry too much about r- writing the whole
Yeah, you don't
to
need to
know.
have the whole series and you don't need to start doing a sizzle reel. In fact, I usually tell
But it's good to develop a Bible. It's good to know where the series is going, the episodes and are going, and have an idea in your mind about where they're going, so you convey that. But if they like the pitch deck, they'll ask for more.
and I actually tell people, and you can correct me because it's always a good time to get corrected by somebody who actually knows. I usually tell people not to do a sizzle reel for a project because they can never get the level because they don't have any money and they can't get the name talent that's in the project and they can't get the location. It's never going to accurately represent what the project's going to look like. So it can be dangerous to shoot a sizzle reel, unless you've got enough funding to make it look like what the actual thing might actually look like. Is that wrong or in the ball?
Well, no, you're not wrong. Do recommend people don't spend money to go out and shoot a sizzle reel. I think it's more important. Go shoot a short film
Mhm.
that shows that you can execute and deliver. But for example, on a film I'm doing right now, we put together an existing footage sizzle reel. So it's just to convey it's like it's a video pitch deck. It's basically the look and feel of the film stolen from clips from other films. So we got music to it and graphics. It gives potential investors an idea of what the project would look like,
Mhm.
realize. But no, don't go spend money shooting a sizzle reel.
'Cause it's something that's money that you should be using on development, not
Yeah. Or
Mhm.
shoot a short film if you're a first time director.
Get a
Use
credit that
that money to shoot a short film that, well, and on that note, what I did do, I suggested this first time director shoot a film, and I said, make it relate somewhat to our film so that you can convey
Mhm.
that you can shoot in that manner, but don't try and make the film.
That makes sense. Is if you have someone asks, "Is a pitch deck made in Google Docs too cheap?" This is actually the last question we have, unless somebody else pops one in. Is a pitch deck made in Google Docs too cheap? When you're making pitch decks, I guess it depends on the level of film that you're working on, but do you use Canva.com or Photoshop.com or
I
Good
don't know enough, to be honest, I don't know enough about Google Docs graphic capabilities because I don't use it for that.
Mhm,
Barely use it for much of anything.
mhm,
I use PowerPoint or
mhm.
Pages, uh, basically those two. Yeah. Can't comment on Google Docs. I ever use it. Maybe I'll try it now that
Yeah, but there's some I rather like Google Docs, but the cool thing about Google Docs is you have the capacity to share them and you can make it so that only certain people can see them. That's one of the best things. And if you make a change, they will automatically see it and you can both update the document together, which is
I'll
something
check it out. If it looks good,
it
if
doesn't
it
matter.
works, and it's convenient for you, do it. Absolutely.
Oh,
As long as it looks
it doesn't
professional.
have to be it doesn't have to be space age. It's because it's conveying information in visuals, not necessarily trying to reinvent the world. I really like Canva as well, and it's very full featured, and it's very easy to use, drag and drop. So cool. What I'll do is we've answered a lot of questions and we've talked for longer than I made you stay so long. But I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. I hope that people reach out to you, and you're going to have their contact information in just a few minutes. Um, I remind people that if you click in the chat window, you go to the top of it, there's a link to if you click the link there and sign up, then I'll make available to you a copy of this workshop. So people always ask, can I have a recording of this workshop? Yes, click the link that's in the webinar chat window right now. You will have, within 24 to 48 hours, you will have a copy of this workshop that you can watch and share. You'll have the opportunity to have other people watch it with you if they happen to be producing partners, so that they can discuss these issues and can figure out whether or not you can work with Jack to create a budget or to get a consult when you need help producing your projects from a consultant. Is there anything that we should have covered that we didn't get around to covering tonight?
I think that's it. I think that's it. It's just great speaking with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I really had a
Um,
good time.
and no, I welcome everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I will offer to give best consideration to everybody who's tuned in tonight, the lowest possible fee I can charge. And I haven't said it yet, but I'll have a discount factor for everyone who tuned in tonight. So make sure you mention Nancy Fulton when you email me.
You're very sweet. I have to say, one of the things I really like about my folks is because I love film students. They're wonderful people, but they don't have a lot of money.
Sure.
And
Neither do most filmmakers.
neither do
Don't
most
worry,
folks.
they're not unique.
But one of the things I do is the folks that are in my group, a lot of times they do have the assets and resources to put together the projects that they're working on. So I like to think that they'll be able to develop they certainly have need of the kind of fast track consulting and training that you can provide them, because there's not a lot of people that can do that. They don't exist. You can't get somebody who's got the experience. You can say, this is what you're doing wrong, or this is what's going to happen, or watch out for this, because this could be coming down the track. And that's something that you can provide that, uh, because my folks are old enough to have worked in a lot of industries, they definitely appreciate. So thank you very much for taking the time.
One thing I will mention, because I think it's their asset there. I'm pretty much FilmBudget or movie budget on all social media. You're
Wow.
welcome to follow me. I post a lot of interesting stuff that I find of interest and share. So I'm Facebook at movie budget, or Instagram at FilmBudget and movie budget, Twitter at FilmBudget. So look for me online, and I recommend you follow me if you want to see as I vet news and information, I post what I find of interest that people might be interested to look at. So
I think that's a great idea.
I'm also at Greentrees Films on Insta as well, but mostly FilmBudget or movie budget.
Perfect. What I'll do is you'll have access and you'll be able to do a follow-up email to people on the call tonight. And then I think you have that in the signature on your email. But what I can do is when I create the video, I can make sure that I note it at the bottom of the screen so people going forward will know how to follow you.
No, that's great. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Nancy. Thanks for everybody who's tuned in. I really appreciate it. It's
Mhm.
been a great experience. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it tremendously. Thank you very much for taking the time. Okay.
My pleasure.
Bye, everybody.